Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show. Today, I'm very honored to be hosting UTXO Alliance Roundtable. We have members from various chains here, and the theme for this discussion will center around the following topics. How the UTXO model reinforces security, privacy, and resiliency over time. How each blockchain implements UTXO transactions to best suit their platform's needs, and unique value propositions on each platform's use of UTXO and some of the potential drawbacks in this model compared to the account-based model and vice versa. And in conclusion, we'll see if there's any actual realistic opportunities and potential for all of the members of this alliance to build up meaningful collaborations and relationships in the future. So welcome, guys. Thank you all. We have Charles from Komodo.
Hi, everyone.
I can't do them all off the top of my head, to be honest. We have Benjamin from IO, Input Output. Welcome, Ben.
Pleasure to be here.
Alexander Slezarenko, core developer of Ergo. Thank you, sir, for joining.
Hi.
Hongchao from Aletheum, also core developer.
Hello, everyone.
Jordan Mack from Nervos.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Nice to meet you, Jordan. Johnny Law from Digibyte as well.
Present and accounted for. Glad to be here, guys.
Hans from Topl. Welcome.
Buddy.
And our good friend, imaginary username, whose real name I don't know, from the Bitcoin Cash ecosystem and general protocols.
Hello, guys. Good to be here.
So in a way, I am no expert, just like the audience members, about UTXO. I have a basic understanding of how it functions. I do see some of the pros in terms of the innovation that can be done with it, but I also noticed that our entire industry has followed, for the most part, Ethereum's lead in following the account-based model. Ben, as sort of one of the higher ups at Input Output, could you please explain some of the features of UTXO and what are some of the drawbacks of the account-based model? And why do you think this is kind of the way the industry has shaped up after all, considering Bitcoin was UTXO to begin with?
Yeah, sure. So again, thanks for having me. So I'm Ben Beckman. I'm the Director of Architecture and Infrastructure at IO. So we build a chain named Cardano, or we participate in the development of it. Our goal with that chain is to decentralize the entire chain and help the community build on top of it and make it their own. Right? We have a particular ethos and a particular way that we've gone about this. We've started with a lot of very rigorous research in the academic space to find the best models for our use. The one that we landed on is UTXO for some very good reasons that we're going to talk about today. But just to kind of touch on the question of why UTXOs may be less popular than account-based models, a lot of it comes down to the programming model. It's very easy to think about an account model, but the counter to that is you have parallelism that you lose. You have deterministic capabilities that you lose. There's a bunch of other things that you lose when you go that direction. And so we want to enable that, even if how you deal with the particular asset is a little trickier. So what we need to do, and I think what this community can help do, is help build tools that support these types of models to make them easier to use so that you don't have to have as much knowledge about how they work, and then build on top of that, right? Build the layers up from the basic fundamental UTXO or EUTXO, like what we have, to other capabilities and enabling their use into the future.
Wonderful. And now, speaking of EUTXO, what does the E stand for? I know what it is, but can you kind of expand upon why there's a differentiation there between EUTXO and UTXO in Cardano's case?
So yeah, the E is extended. So we took the UTXO model, which I think the best example people have is it's kind of the bills and the change that you have in your wallet, right? That's the UTXO model. You can subdivide them and kind of recombine them. And in our case, we wanted to add the ability to have smart contracts or smart contract capability on the UTXO that's in the chain. And so we did that by extending the model and adding a capability in an entire language so that you can put a script, think of it as a script, a spend script on top of that UTXO so that you could build a capability into the chain that's native. We have some examples of those scripts could be something simple as minting, but they could be much more complicated, like verifying a certificate is actually valid before allowing the coins to be spent. So by having that capability, now we can have tokens that you can trigger the spend and you can protect the spend based off of, if you're able to redeem it or not.
Perfect. So there appears to be many variations and creative uses in using this model. Hongchao, I know with Alephium, you guys have kind of coined this term of stateful UTXOs. Nervos has something similar to that in many ways as well. But Hongchao, can you kind of elaborate on, in Alephium's ecosystem, this idea of a stateful UTXO and what you can do with that, especially as your bridge to other ecosystems is opening up this year?
Yeah, sure. So I would probably use like programming like paradigms as an analogy. So like in programming, we have like functional programming, and we have like stuff like object-oriented programming, and so on. UTXO model is kind of similar to like purely functional programming, in that the UTXO is immutable. It's like stateless. There's no global state, and you have like inputs and you get some sort of outputs in the transaction. And account model is kind of similar to like object-oriented programming, in that you have contracts which has its own state, and then you communicate with the contract using the public method of the contract, and so on. So if you have some experience about programming, you know that like some of the problems are probably more naturally, can be probably more sort of naturally modeled using functional programming. For example, if you write a compiler in Haskell, it probably feels more natural, but in some other problems, probably more natural to be modeled using OOP. For example, if you design a game with a lot of like actors, and each of the actors has its own state and so on. So if the stateful like UTXO model combines the UTXO model with the account model, so it's kind of similar to like, for example, Alephium is actually written in Scala. I know that some of the projects here are written in Scala as well, and Scala is kind of a programming language where that is kind of functional, but it also has the object-oriented aspect of it. So it takes like the advantages of both paradigms, and hopefully it's like becomes a more powerful thing. So stateful like UTXO is kind of like that. It allows us to sort of manage the assets using UTXO model, and benefit from the security, many of the security features, and the concurrency parallelization feature of the UTXO, but also it allows us to sort of be a little bit more expressive. So that's sort of the gist of it.
Very good. Thank you for that. Jordan, nice to meet you. I've been trying to get you on for an interview. It hasn't panned out yet, but I've heard great things about you from Matt. Could you please, I think Nervos has a very unique way of going about this model. You guys have this idea of storage rent and state rent, where you don't have this infinite blockchain bloat in Nervos ecosystem. How does the UTXO model play a role in that? And could you kind of expand upon those creative ideas?
Yeah. So Nervos' programming model, which is based on the UTXO, has a lot of different aspects of it that are really kind of intertwined, which unfortunately makes it very difficult to explain in a short period of time, but I'm going to do my best here. So it incorporates a stateful type of of programming model based on UTXOs, where as opposed to like something like Bitcoin in the past, where it didn't have a state for the program to actually that's executing to really access, and as in it couldn't remember between one transaction to the next transaction what variables had been set. And so it made it very difficult to operate with, at least not in the traditional sense that most programmers are familiar with. So Nervos introduced a state to that in the more traditional sense, which made it much more closer to normal programming. Now, where the state rent and all that comes in is really in the tokenomics, where that's where I think Nervos really shines, and that's what really got me interested in it when I first heard about it. Because it's one of the most sustainable models I've actually heard. Whereas there's a lot of currencies out there that were inflationary, but Nervos is actually a very similar to Bitcoin in the aspect that it's largely deflationary in the long term. And it does this all through the state rent mechanism, which is also incentivizing sustainable usage of the chain, whereas like Ethereum has problems with state bloat. Where the state is getting very, very large or uncontrollably. And part of that is because there's no incentive to take data back off the chain, to get it all out of the state once you've put it there. Whereas Nervos requires you to lock up CK bytes, which is our native currency, in order, it's one CK byte for one piece, 1 byte of data, 1-to-1. So when you lock that up there, it's automatically using that state, the what's locked up to pay state rent through targeted inflation, targeted as just what's on being used specifically for storage. So what's there is losing a small amount of value. Now, when the incentive part comes in, is if you don't need that data on the chain anymore, you can take that out, and then by taking it out of the state, you actually get your CK bytes back, the full amount. So even though you actually technically have paid a little bit of value, as in you're getting the same amount of CK bytes, but they've lost some value through inflation. That's a very, very small amount. We're talking usually fractions of a penny in the course of maybe years. But it allows you to pay it in a very transparent way. Now, the entire incentive mechanism and stuff behind that is kind of hard to explain in a short period of time. But what makes it possible is UTXOs, specifically because with the account model, it's usually based around a smart contract, which is it's very difficult to differentiate user to user. How much space are they actually using within the contract, right? You have to assign that value to somebody in order to be able to deduct it properly. And that's not really very easy to do with a contract, but with a UTXO, the UTXO itself is actually owned by a user, which is the perfect setup for a pay for exactly what you use, because every single UTXO is actually owned by a user, and then you could charge state rent pretty much exactly as it should be, perfectly paid for use. So that's in a nutshell, that's how the system works, and it's completely 100% enabled by UTXO. We wouldn't be able to do it at all on the account model.
Thank you for the explanation. Johnny, Digibyte has been around for 9 years or so. Correct me if I'm wrong. And
9 years.
As one of the kind of, at this point in time, one of the longer chains, could you just kind of touch upon what Digibyte is intended to do and how UTXOs kind of play their role within that ecosystem?
Yeah, sure. Like, certainly we've been called a dino chain many times. And ultimately, if you do one thing and you do it exceptionally well, then you have real purpose in the ecosystem. And I would tell you, as a payment layer for the UTXO model, we simply are one of the most efficient and censorship resistant. Now, we've got some work to do in terms of continuing to build out the network, but with multi-algo mining, which is something that was pioneered by Digibyte some years ago, it just increases our, I guess, resistance to those giant mining pools from taking control of that side of the equation. And then multi-shield, as with real-time difficulty adjustment, really make sure that our block times are consistent, nailed at about 15 seconds over the course of years. As that multi-shield will adjust difficulty based on hash that comes in on any one of those algos, and we've seen that tested in real time. So, when you ask, what is our purpose? So we can do many other things, but at the base of this is we operate as intended without hiccups, so to speak, and can move a lot of Digibyte very quickly for very little fee, and nobody can stop it. And ultimately, if we think through like why was this entire space created as a peer-to-peer currency, it does it exceptionally well. Now, there's other things that, of course, we're working through because we're not just going to set there, but at the base, I say we do one thing, we do it exceptionally well.
Perfect. Hans, if I can grab you for a second to talk about Topl. Same question. How does the UTXO environment help Topl kind of move around in your blockchain? Are there any unique properties to it? And what is Topl's ultimate goal? I see that you have a kind of a mini slogan next to you in the background with the Topl logo that says "Build Good." So could you please expand upon that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what Hongchao mentioned about UTXOs being analogous to functional programming really hits the nail on the head, because what really attracted us to the UTXO model itself was this idea of composability. So when you have an asset and you want to lock it up for various purposes, you don't necessarily have to just choose one lock. You can compose different locks. You can hierarchically compose them. You can do ands and ors, at least in our system, to really reflect quite a robust mechanism for what you're trying to express in the chain, and that would be very difficult to do in an account-based model. And kind of to circle back around to what Ben mentioned about the sort of cache versus account model. Question is, where do you want to be worried about your state management? If you have an account, it's very easy to check the global state, but it's very hard to update that global state, which makes things slow. But in an UTXO model, you really only need to worry about what's happening right in front of you. The cache transaction that's right in front of you. It can make things a little bit more difficult in terms of building a picture of the global state if you need that for some reason. You need to, basically count up your coins and your bills, but we think that that's a fair trade-off. And what we do with this composability, goes like Jordan said, along several different dimensions that can be kind of hard to explain all at once. But just to give an example, one of the things that we're very excited about is our Tetra asset model, which is coming out later this year. Which is a method of composable fungibility primitives that allows for a very granular representation of different kinds of on-chain assets. So you have quite a lot of flexibility, not only in terms of what an individual asset can do between fungible and non-fungible, but you can create fungibility between classes of assets, between organizations that control assets, as well as minting and burning policies and various things of that kind. That would be, it would be very difficult to achieve the same thing, I think, under an account-based model.
Yeah, we'll touch upon that once we get through everybody. I'm, looking from the outside in, not developing in the space myself, kind of relying along with the knowledge that the developers in it have. It can be puzzling to a lot of people why that tends to be kind of the popular option when it seems that obviously the UTXO model has so many benefits and time-tested opportunities to prove resiliency. But before we do that, Charles, I like the skyline behind you. I think it's Miami, if I'm not mistaken. Welcome, and thank you for taking this interview to kind of talk about Komodo.
Sure, yeah, no, happy to be here. And
so, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Oh, no, go ahead.
No, the same question to you. Basically, what is Komodo's unique value proposition? What are you guys working on, and how does the UTXO model fit into your ecosystem?
Yeah, I think one of the main purposes of Komodo ever since its inception was to connect blockchains. When Komodo first launched, we picked the Equihash model to launch the original blockchain because there really wasn't that many options back then. There was Ethereum, but the whole goal of what we're doing is interconnecting blockchains. And initially, we were when we launched the Atomic DEX protocol, it was mainly to connect UTXO blockchains, so Bitcoin, Ethereum, or Bitcoin LTC, and any other UTXO, allowing people to trade peer-to-peer without intermediaries. Then we expanded it to like account model blockchains like Ethereum. Recently, we added Cosmos. So I would say really that's our main value proposition, or our main product is the Atomic DEX protocol. And currently, its major or most used use case is basically trading between one blockchain to another, without using intermediaries, without using bridges, allowing people to trade back and forth between these blockchains.
Yeah, every year that goes by, it seems that DEXs become much more attractive, but also they also have to be built much better than we've seen in the past. So thank you for that. That's very interesting, and I hope more people look into Komodo, and particularly for that feature alone. It's very important. We have those types of ways to bridge and kind of tap into things maybe in a non-custodial manner. Alex from Ergo, we have a bridge coming up, if not already, on mainnet. Called the Rosen Bridge, and kind of piggybacking off that, what can you tell me about Ergo and the way you use UTXO and kind of this idea of bridging assets over responsibly?
Okay, so I'm not sure I'm the right person to talk about bridge. Specifically, I can talk more about like a core protocol of Ergo, since I was doing this stuff from very beginning of the project. For UTXO specifically, our main goal was to, because we were inspired by Bitcoin, the model, and Alex Chepornoy has this really good idea of reproducible contracts, which allows extended UTXO to be Turing complete over chain transactions. So we thought that programmability of UTXO is not worse, but actually better than account model. So the potential of UTXO in terms of scalability and programmability is very big. So because of that, we choose this model, and this allows us to implement storage for UTXO set, and like have some monetary policy for storing in the UTXO to prevent the uncontrollable growth of the UTXO set. And also it allows to implement garbage collection of lost coins, for example, and also Nipopov fits very nicely into this model, which allows to implement like clients. And also what is good in UTXO is the security, because everything is immutable. If you hold your coins and it's protected by the contract, it's not possible to somehow mutate it, because it is immutable, and it can only be spent when all the conditions are satisfied. This is also very good for security. And also, as recent proposals in Cardano ecosystem, which I believe is called LEOS, this is the new for input transactions and it's like a combination of input transactions, endorsement transactions, and rank transactions. So which allows to implement on layer one scalability of the layer one to make sub-second confirmation times with different securities guarantees. All this also possible on Ergo. So potentially this can be implemented also on Ergo. So this actually brings the UTXO in very much ahead of accounting model. So that's how we look at UTXO from Ergo perspective.
Perfect. Thank you for that summary. Imaginary username. If you can dive into very briefly where Bitcoin Cash diverge from the original chain due to limitations on that chain, and kind of how Bitcoin Cash has taken the baton from BTC and kind of ran with it with the UTXO model.
We people in the Bitcoin Cash community generally do not think of ourselves as diverging, and rather we are inheriting a certain version of the vision, right? So currently we can see that we can see that the bigger chain BTC is doing the really conservative thing where aside from blocks, this is manifest not just in the block size conservatism that we have observed and led to the original split, but also other things like OpCTV and drive chain and things that have difficulty getting in. And I personally think that there is nothing terribly wrong with being ultra conservative. It is just a certain version of the vision, but we are embracing the other version of the vision. Like in particular in the UTXO context, I think that there was a reason the UTXO model was chosen, and that was because it started off from a currency, a monetary use case, and the UTXO model fits that better as opposed to the account-based model, which generally would be the intuitive thing to do if you started off designing a easy to program, easy to develop for system. And so we at Bitcoin Cash seeks to extend and perfect this currency and monetary use case. So everything we do goes around extending and empowering the strengths of the UTXO model and also the currency use case. We tend to put contracts on pots of cash and slices of money instead of putting slices of money and pots of cash on a contract, so to speak. And so everything we do, like the very recently activated cash tokens and how we design the introspection upgrades and so on, goes around with that in mind, keeping the strength of the UTXO model, such as being easier to improve performance on, and being easier to isolate contracts from each other. And also incentivizing privacy. We try to keep as much of that as possible and try to not do things that are attractive in certain contexts, but brings us closer to the account-based model, such as, it might be tempting to add a global state, as some have advocated in Bitcoin a long time ago, and that would make a lot of things infinitely easier to implement, but that would also degrade many of the strengths of the UTXO model. So those things we tend to avoid. And yeah, that is at a very high level what we're trying to do at Bitcoin Cash in the UTXO context.
Perfect. Thank you all for kind of being patient as everybody went around the room. We have one more participant. John, welcome.
Hi, everyone. Sorry I'm late.
No worries. When people see this recording, you'll always be on time because they can always replay it. So could you tell us a bit more about the organization you work with and what you guys do in kind of this world of UTXO and where you guys fit in the alliance, why you joined?
Sure. So we're Wolfram Blockchain Labs, a subsidiary of Wolfram Research. I believe that where we fit in the alliance is we make a lot of tools for different blockchains, and we integrate blockchains into our technology stack. One of the overall views that we have of just knowledge in general is using Wolfram language as, like Stephen Wolfram would say, the world's only knowledge-based programming language. And so we have this really strong view about computable data, and we see blockchains as being economic activities, economic backbones for various communities that are out there. And so there's all of this information about those communities. And so naturally we want that information into our language. And we've worked a lot to add different UTXO chains to Wolfram language and continue to do so. And now we're looking more at doing like more universal UTXO related tools in that process of our work. So that's kind of what we're doing in general. And then John Woodard, I help to run Wolfram Blockchain Labs. Oh, and I should also mention, even though this is recorded, we do have this great chain science conference coming up with Topl and other folks. That's coming up June 15th through 17th in Boston, Massachusetts this year, which is 2023.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you for the plug. I don't mind any plugs. Plug away. So now, taking that into account, now we can kind of open up the discussion and the formalities can go out the window. You just touched on the fact that you're hosting a conference, or you're participating in a conference in one of the most anti-crypto countries right now in the world, in terms of having this innovation, having a chance to really hold and harness the potential there, and then an active, deliberate effort to dampen out and stamp out any attempts to kind of advance crypto's narrative. Why, and this is for everybody, and there will be a bit of overlap. We're not in person, and that's fine. But why do you guys all feel like this is something worth developing on? Like, why build in this space, and why build on a model that has, for whatever reason, become mostly unpopular compared to a lot of the account-based chains? And for those of you that live in jurisdictions that you know, like me, that we don't really know where we're going to stand as a country on this issue, why continue to build in this regard? When you're developers, you can go all build in Ethereum and Solidity and make a lot of money, or go on Indeed and do something else altogether.
Well, and Sigma. So I would just say it is certainly missional in terms of how many of us approach the work within the Digibyte ecosystem, thinking through that we're going to build the network that's needed before people understand that it's needed. Because if you wait until that moment in history in which there's nothing else that works in a permissionless world, it's too late. So you've got to build the resilience right now in this moment while we still can. And so really that's, I think, our purpose and why we continue to do the work.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Anybody
I can only
else?
agree with that. Yeah.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I can only agree with that. Yes, it's a mission of some kind of. And also, the money should be fixed at this point, so we need to have all the tools for this.
Yeah. Many of us here are proof of work chains, on top of the fact that they're UTXO models as well. So against old narratives involved in the space, it does feel that, I don't know, Bitcoin has kind of dropped the ball in not understanding whether it's a storage of value or a peer-to-peer digital cash as originally intended. And there seems to be more room as we see a lot of cracks within the first and second market caps for new innovation and new faces to kind of take hold in the space. This religion around we should only follow one chain or whatever is most popular because they have the most smart contracts deployed on Ethereum, for example, and it's just very easy to kind of tap into that library of smart contracts. It does feel like there's hopefully a shift in the narrative here. I'm very inspired by a lot of what you guys are building within your own communities. Ben, starting from the top here, what do you think about kind of the industry where we're at? And do you have any idea or comments on why Ethereum chose the model that they did and kind of diverged from the trend that was happening back maybe in 2013, 2014? Since Cardano is kind of, in a way, a follow-up to Ethereum, with Charles kind of leaving that, his contributions there and starting something altogether on its own.
Well, so kind of getting back to the, why we're in this. So I live in New York, right? I live in the regulated place where turns out we have rules, and those rules apply. And if you play by those rules, right, you can operate in the state of New York. The reason I'm in this space is that there's a lot of other things that you can do besides just, the usual things that people think about. And basically, whenever a boundary shows up, that boundary is an opportunity where tools like this, whether we're talking UTXOs or some other decentralized capability, they remove a lot of costs and they can make things much more efficient. So that's why I'm in this particular space and kind of betting, portions of my career on it. But the why, Ethereum explicitly stated that they wanted to have a more approachable model, right? That's why they picked an account model. They chose that right up front. Where we differed is we looked at the UTXO model, and there's a lot of simplicity to the UTXO model and a lot of capability, right? You get this parallelism, you get determinism. And so we wanted to see, can we combine those? Can we keep that simple UTXO-based component of the model and then extend it with some type of programmable capability on top of it? That's where we moved to, because we saw there's an advantage to how Bitcoin does it. There's an advantage to how Ethereum does it. We don't need to copy those directly. We can do something similar yet different. And then we actually saw others kind of have the same light bulb show up, right? You had Zcash that basically has a spend script that's a zero knowledge proof. Well, turn that into something more complex, and now you can have something very, very, very close to the extended UTXO that we have. So that's why we went that particular direction, because we think we can get a lot more capacity out of this particular system with a lot less limitations than somebody that chose an account-based model.
Wonderful. So if nobody else has comments regarding that, I would say, touching upon the idea of privacy, we've seen kind of that become a touchy subject ever since the beginning, right? If you're emboldening privacy features, you are an advocate for money laundering, or basically, if you're not guilty, why do you have to hide what you hold, when it comes to money, right? How does UTXO embolden privacy compared to the account-based model? For those that may not understand, UTXO is more of like dealing with the digital cash, where you give somebody $100 bills, you get the remaining cash in new bills, and the account-based model is like a bank account in a way that always things come in, things go out, and it's just a lot easier to kind of keep up with that. But yeah, this idea of privacy, anybody can take this topic and run with it. And does it create any sort of hesitations when you are in the public eye and building these things?
I can take that for a bit. So one fundamental difference between the UTXO model and the account model, and which is sometimes I hear being paraded as a strength of the account model is that the account model is slightly more efficient in space when it comes to transactions, because you put all this you can put a lot of transactions that all ends up in the same account, and that account has a singular balance that is being updated. So when you spend, you just spend from that balance, as opposed to the UTXO model, where when you spend, you have to go back into the figurative pocket and then collect all the coins and then spend those coins one by one. Sometimes in the same transaction, a lot of times in the same transaction, but you basically have to explicitly spend them. So that may look like it creates larger transactions, and it is less quote unquote efficient in space. But the upside is that doing this gives you a flat fee in term whether you use the same address or not. This makes this particular model therefore makes it plausible, especially on a chain where fees are non-trivial, to do even like very, very, very basic privacy practices, like not reusing addresses. It is very basic, and when I first touched a EVM wallet like MetaMask, I couldn't believe my eyes. Wow, everybody is reusing addresses, and that was apparently the norm. And then after a while, I realized, that is the norm for a reason. And it's not just because it's easier to program, but it also saves you a lot in fees. So the incentive is heavily skewing in the direction of not keeping privacy in an account-based model, while that is not the case in the UTXO model. You have a good starting point, and then you can build your privacy, more advanced privacy features on top of that.
Perfect. Jordan, Mac, I was wondering if you can kind of explain what you're doing to basically stick with the UTXO positives, but also not limit yourself to kind of the EVM side of things with this idea that you have in Nervos of universal DApps.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Right, with the Nervos, this idea and concept of universal DApps, that you can have other chains, especially those that are on the account-based model side, tap into your UTXO chain. Can you just kind of explain how that functions and why that's important to do versus just kind of isolating? Not saying that anybody here is isolating, but sticking with the UTXO side of things and then discounting the account-based side. So why is it important to kind of bridge the gap here between these models in this industry?
Right. Well, it's kind of our belief that multi-chain is very clearly the future. We all started, well, if you go back far enough, we all started as a maximalist. I did too. I started back in 2011 when there was really only, Bitcoin was the only big chain out there, represented like 99.9% of the market share. And at that time, there was a mantra about why do you need more than one chain? But we didn't really see all of the use cases that would slowly emerge over time. The cat's out of the bag now. We're not going back to single chain. Multi-chain is absolutely the future. And so what does that mean for the user? It's really, you're going to see different chains have different types of values to start to emerge, certain things that they're a little bit better at than maybe the other chain. And it's only natural for DApps to start to flow to wherever it makes the most sense. And so over time as a user, you're going to have to interact with multiple different chains. And so from the standpoint of Nervos, like how do you actually facilitate that to make that easier? And so Nervos has taken as a core principle, making flexibility one of the main things that it's trying to accomplish, making the programming model very flexible. And one of the ways that that manifests most evidently today is that Nervos can support any crypto primitive. That's the different types of cryptography that are available on various chains. Not all chains support the same cryptography, but Nervos actually doesn't incorporate any, as in none are actually hard-coded. So we're very well suited to be able to more or less speak the same language as every other blockchain out there, and be able to connect to all of them. And so that's really beneficial for users because they're able to have a place that is more or less kind of like a bridge to everything, where assets can actually flow inward. And whereas in certain other chains, if they didn't have the same cryptography on one side as on the other side, they wouldn't actually be able to communicate properly. And you for example, you could not move assets back and forth as easily. So that's one of the ways that we're experimenting with that. And the way that it's manifesting itself today on our blockchain is that because we have we support any type of encryption, any type of crypto primitive, we can actually support addresses from any type of environment, and that includes Ethereum, and includes everything that's based on Ethereum in the account model. Their addresses can be represented on our chain and unlocked with the user's wallet from Ethereum. So you can actually be an Ethereum user, interact with a DApp that's built on Nervos, just like it was built on Ethereum. The user might not even know that they're using a Nervos-based application because it's just gonna work just like it did with Ethereum. So that's what we're trying to enable. And when you say from the user side, like how does it manifest from the user side? We're really just trying to make it much more seamless. Just like today, if you take any web browser, you can go to basically any website and it just works. We want to enable that same type of functionality with blockchains.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for that. Hongchao, welcome back into the mix. You've been patiently waiting. With the Lemon upgrade on Alephium, and also being kind of one of the newer chains for sure, could you kind of touch upon how important it is, especially as a sort of like a smaller market cap and also newer blockchain, to kind of seek layers and connectivity with other ecosystems that just naturally have more value locked into place?
You mean how important it is to connect to other ecosystems?
Yeah, Lemon and also stateful UTXOs, how it can kind of interact with the account-based model, even though obviously Alephium is a UTXO-based blockchain. Yeah.
So stateful UTXO. So maybe I should step back a little bit and because Alephium's journey with UTXO really start from sharding, because we are first of all a sharded blockchain, and that wouldn't be kind of possible without UTXO, because UTXO turns out to be because it's immutable, it's stateless, and it doesn't have a global state, and it can be executed in parallel. So it's quite essential for us to build the sharding algorithm, and it's pretty difficult to build it with the account-based model, because as you can see, Ethereum still hasn't launched their sharding solution after this many years, and we've been live since more than 1 year ago, and we have 16 shards in our production blockchain right now. And after the band upgrades, right now we have enabled a lot of new features, to make it a lot more developer friendly, and we have released a lot of good cool features about SDKs and so on, so developers can develop interesting DApps on our ecosystem. But obviously, without some of the infrastructure, such as DEX, such as bridges, it's kind of difficult to build meaningful, useful for DApps. So we are actually releasing the the bridge on testnet right now, and right now it supports like everything bridging to like Ethereum and also BSC on testnet, and our plan is to sort of release it's on mainnets soon. So yeah.
Perfect. Now, I want to open up the floor a bit more versus asking one-on-one question, because we'll be here all day. I guess I can make an interview with each of you for those who I haven't interviewed already. I would say, for kind of the smaller cap coins in here or blockchains, what are kind of the challenges you see every day, and what keeps you hopeful, and what is also the strategy to keep going and actually become more widely adopted? Since at the end of the day, if you can build all these neat things, but if we don't have user adoption, we don't have people caring about it more and more in the everyday world, ultimately we're in like a tech bubble, so to speak. So I think, we've seen, especially with Ergo, just because you build it, they don't necessarily come. We need more adoption. So what kind of keeps you guys going? I suppose I would say this to Hans and Charles, but really anybody in here.
Yeah, so I'll take that one, because I think we're the baby of the group. We're pre-mainnet launch. So for us, it really is about the mission, right? That was something that I didn't really touch on earlier, but for us, we're sort of oriented towards, if we take these technical innovations that are enabled by the UTXO system, how can we leverage those into empowering innovation in the impact space? So a lot of our builders, a lot of our clients are operating in this sort of ESG ecosystem, or they're just communities in the global South that really don't have the resources necessarily to participate in traditional economic systems, or even in some crypto systems. There is no like, oh, let me just spin up an AWS instance for my node. Maybe you might be able to, pool some resources and get a Raspberry Pi to process transactions. So from our perspective, that allows us to have a lot of hope for the future, because if we can make this happen, a lot of the projects that we're hoping to empower will actually literally be making the world a better place. So you sort of get motivation from both sides of the coin. From, yes, we're building this foundation while we still can, like Johnny mentioned, you have a window of time to do that. But on the other hand, you also have something to look at, like the outcome of what you've built. And at least for us, that's a huge motivator.
Perfect. And Charles, with Komodo, if you could touch upon that. I mean, you've been around for quite a while, and obviously there's still a lot of features being churned out. What are the challenges of when you're not widely exposed, you're not in the so-called crypto journalist websites and being put into the press? What is it like, those challenges of having to build in kind of difficult environments and maybe not getting the recognition for the technology that you're building at times?
I think, in regards to the DEX that we built, which again, I think it's like our flagship project, because throughout the years we've built really cool tech that allows people to launch their own smart chains. Like with one command, they can launch their own native blockchain. We pioneered some of the tech that basically recycles Bitcoin's hash rate to protect blockchains that are UTXO based that might not have a lot of hash rate. They act like anchor points. And none of this technology was adopted widely, right? And some of them even has been reinvented. But the DEX as it is now, I think, is getting a little bit more recognition, mainly because we've seen some of the issues, especially with like centralized exchanges. Some of this DeFi boom also exposed a lot of the problems with some of the centralized platforms. And the way that we build out the DEX, I think the reason why it hasn't gotten a lot of adoption, it's mainly because the way that it works is totally different from, for example, like a Uniswap DEX, right? The DEX that we build is made with the purpose of being cross-chain. So it depends on block times. It's often slower than, for example, like a Uniswap DEX, but it allows users to trade from one blockchain to another with users, not with intermediaries directly. And at times, obviously, not getting the adoption that you want is an issue. But the way that we've looked at it is we can't build this thing by ourselves. And what we're polishing now is a system of basically like leveraging other projects that don't have this tech that want to adopt it. So we make it easy for them to either use their technology with their own branded systems, so that their community actually uses our tech without necessarily knowing they're using our tech. And obviously that adds value to our network. So I think, throughout the years, I think one of the things that has kept us going is that goal that we know what we want to do, and we've accomplished quite a bit of it, but there's still a lot of work to do. And Komodo being a very sustainable project has also helped grow the team. So every year we've grown consistently in the development department. We now have a business department, quite a large marketing team. So, but we're working on things now, again, to open the doors to other projects, not necessarily us getting, being like one of the top 10 projects, but having those top 10 projects use our tech and then us growing as a result. It's an uphill battle, but I think the tech that we're building, I think somebody mentioned this earlier, it's something that's needed. It's just not something that a lot of people paid a lot of attention to, especially in the past few years. But the way things are going, I think DEXs are going to be very important. Cross-chain DEXs are going to be even more important, not only for crypto to crypto trading, but as assets are moved to the digital realm, onto blockchains and onto other systems, these types of DEXs are going to become more relevant.
Perfect. I would ask, and maybe beginning with John and Ben here, how do we use these tools and kind of, I don't want to say upend, that sounds aggressive, but how do we integrate into the legacy system of how finance is traditionally done right now?
Wow, that's an expansive question. I would say that, like, how we've looked at it, we're actually have stuff, research going in that area. I would say, one, taking the advantages of like thinking about communities entirely. And although I would say Web3 and blockchain based communities are often anarcho-capitalist in origin, I think something that's shared kind of across the board is this tendency towards anarchic structures. And I don't mean to use that in a scary way. I mean that to mean like self-organizing communities, that's really an important aspect of almost everyone in this space, that they want to think about from a community standpoint, how can we move beyond having top-down organizations and instead have grassroots organizations. So when you talk about financial structures, going back to the cypherpunks or Nakamoto, it's critical to look at it from that perspective, that it's from that like bottom-up kind of approach of communities being able to displace centralized financial structures, regardless of what those structures may look like from a political, ideological perspective. So I think that's how I would look at it kind of across the board, and the opportunity that almost all blockchain communities have to go out and build with, again, grassroots communities in mind, building forward, that there's that shared kind of structure and belief that communities can organize. And from that standpoint, people may go in different directions in terms of organizing, in terms of the projects that they take on. But I think that's natural and actually helpful, because people can actually move quite actively in digital communities. It's very easy for people to pick up, sell all their currency and move to another chain that meets their ideological predispositions. So that's really important aspect. So that's kind of the setting, because again, like, this is an expansive question, so sorry to like drone on in a way. So that's the first kind of setting. Then the next thing is like, okay, well, what's important to replace as a centralized system? That again is where you can say, well, we want to have like community currencies. So if I'm a local grassroots, geographically located community, it may be that I'm no longer satisfied with using a particular currency that's from, again, a top-down government. I want to, as a community, issue our own currency that's going to reinforce the values that we want to incentivize as a community. And there are all sorts of ways that you can do that. And that doesn't necessarily have, like, again, an ideological component. It can be that you want to make sure that you are effectively using farming resources. So you want to make sure that when people sell things as like produce expires, that it gets cheaper, and maybe there are incentives with the currency that you've created for people to sell at cheaper prices, or all sorts of things like that. I can't really think of something on the fly that kind of highlights that. It could be that, again, like loans for community development within that community currency model. All of those things are naturals. They're absolutely naturals for blockchains to support and have created the infrastructure. So that's kind of how I would look at answering that question in like a reasonable amount of time.
I think that was a good answer on the fly. Keep in mind, for the people watching, I've given kind of talking points that are very broad for this roundtable discussion, but I did not give kind of specific questions that I would ask everybody. So I think that was very good on the fly. Ben, kind of the same question for you. You are part of one of the biggest organizations in input-output, and obviously Cardano is the blockchain that benefits from the extensive collaboration you have in your organization. How do you feel that this should be approached? I know Cardano has put a lot of thought into how, you know, you can enable developing countries, especially from the bottom up, to adopt the technology because they need it, versus maybe people in the West that may have several options, and until they're forced to use it, they may not use it. Where do you stand in terms of your perspective on how do we incorporate into the legacy system as an industry?
So I think I align very much with what John mentioned, right? So the technology that we're providing, anybody can use. We go to great lengths to make sure that it's formally proven and, you know, not going to fall apart on you. But then, you know, you go apply it to your particular use. And there are a lot of inefficient systems in the world. These inefficiencies can be in third world and modern day countries. So what drew me to this particular industry was not just that it could disrupt the financial industry and it can enable these other financial related activities. It has lots of other applications. In a former life, we built applications that would help distribute parts through a supply chain so that you could print them and source them from more producers. So you could actually broaden the group that could produce the parts that you needed for the particular asset that you were running. What that does is it brings in a larger community, right? It actually empowers these kind of, let's say, mom and pops or smaller participants to be able to play the game, right? The walls aren't as high as they used to be because the reach is there. And I think the only way to do it is through education and building out communities and establishing applications in those communities that are beneficial to them, because they're the ones that are going to have to build it, right? IO is not going to come along and build some application to help a particular user base because we're not experts in that. Somebody else is. And so what we need to do is we need to be able to provide them with the tools and the confidence that that tool will fit the game that they're playing. and then support them with the capabilities in the tools that we're providing for what they need. Right? Do they need a high throughput capability? Okay, well, that's a different type of system that we would have to provide to them. But it's not going to be top down, right? I'm not going to figure out what everybody needs. It's got to be, done with the work of the people.
Yeah, thank you for that. I would kind of open it up to the floor to discuss the fact that, it's sort of unprecedented in our lifetime that people really do question the value of fiat money in general. Most people seem very secure, even after the US dollar fell off the gold standard, to transact in this currency, and never really question whether this central bank printed money would ever lose its value or diminish in importance on the world stage. Does this kind of real life developments around actual fiat currencies that we use on a daily basis kind of embolden you guys that, okay, I've chosen the right mission in life to work on these things, just because we can't depend on a central entity without accountability to do it for us in terms of mediums of exchange and storage of values? Maybe I would open this up to Alex first and foremost, considering, he's also have a lot of real life experience with countries and kind of conglomerates of ideologies that fall apart very quickly in the 90s.
Yeah. So if you have at least dollar currency in other than American countries, you already have like stable something. So because USD is a reserve currency for the rest of the world. So as long as America is standing, everything is okay. So the question is, so most of the other countries, including Russia, many times has lost a lot of money. People lost the wealth many times in Russia, and it was in 19th, and it was in the Great Crisis to 2008, I think. So it was like a big denomination of ruble currency, and this happens in other countries, in Turkey, and inflation is very big in Argentina. So usually, if the country allows to keep USD or foreign currency, so many people use it to somehow have preservation of wealth. But if not, so what are the options? Yeah, so the crypto in many countries become this kind of safe haven for people to preserve the wealth. So I think this is maybe not very convenient for people, but still, it's like if you don't have other options.
Right. Imaginary username. I've been seeing online a lot of small businesses and merchants having Bitcoin Cash accepted here stickers. I know from your colleague John what he thinks about the original or the true vision of Bitcoin, right? It should have been a peer-to-peer cash that's very easy and good to use. And obviously with BRC20 tokens, we're seeing a lot of cracks in the thinking that BTC kind of held on to for over the past decade, if not longer. And then obviously this kind of conflict with Taproot being an upgrade and opening up the floodgates for issuing these types of things. So what is your opinion on how crypto should be used in sort of the existing frameworks of financial transactions right now in the world?
So So here at Bitcoin Cash, I think this is a fair statement for me to speak of for most of the community that we mostly do think that crypto can provide a real alternative to the existing systems. And by alternative, I don't mean just okay, you swap out a block of thing. Oh, you think Nasdaq is not working as good as it should. Let's swap out Nasdaq and keep all the other things intact. Or you think that Bank of America is not in a good place. Well, let's build a better bank. You think the credit card companies are not doing a good job. Let's swap out credit cards and then keep everything else the same. No, generally speaking, it can I would even go a little bit further to say that it needs to be a full set of alternative monetary system in order to succeed. And you mentioned that we are in some very interesting times in terms of financial stability of the larger world. And I would like to extend on that because we are where we are right now. A lot of people are watching how the financial systems of the world is working or rather not working, and they rightly have a lot of doubts. But on the other hand, people have limited bandwidth to process information, and then you tell them, well, crypto is the alternative. So they turn around and look at crypto, and what do they see? Well, they see Terra, they see FTX, and they see very high profile collapses and their colleagues and friends losing all of their assets and wealth to all the things that they have been advertised to. And so a lot of these people would then rightly question, okay, so you tell us that the Fed is bad, the government is bad. What do you have for us? What I see is all the scams and exploits all over the place. We can tell them till we are red in the face that, well, the whole point is that you have a choice and you are responsible to pick the right thing. But that is not how most of society comes around to process this. They see a thing, they go pick the most high profile ones, and the high profile ones would tend to then either be something that has been around for a really long time, whether it works well or not, such as BTC, or something that has been very, very heavily advertised and is everywhere with all the celebrity endorsements and stuff, such as FTX. That's how society works, and when that collapses, they write off the whole category of things. It doesn't matter where you are in it. So I think that going forward, the crypto ecosystem would have to build actually reliable institutions that can let people sort out good information from bad information about which things are actually boring and reliable and what other things are exciting but perhaps a lot higher risk. That is not something that we have right now, and the whole incentive structure is not geared towards establishing those institutions. I don't have like just snap finger responses to what those institutions should look like, or how they should be constructed. But I think this is something that we as an industry have to think a lot about going forward if the industry is going to have a bright future.
Right. Fair enough. Thank you for that answer. I wanted to ask you all, where do you feel we've gone wrong in kind of the life cycle of crypto, and what will be required to correct the ship? What will get retail and the next billion users onboarded with the correct mindset versus this maybe the Ponzi-nomics of I'm going to buy Bitcoin and just hope it goes up, and I'll sell it when it goes up and I'll make a profit and I'm out. What can we do to actually help onboard those people, see the vision, and repair kind of the image that crypto, unfortunately, some bad actors have tarnished to the public, in the public view?
Yeah, I can add something to that. I mean, that's a very difficult question. And a big part of that is just how do you educate people, which is kind of a universal problem for every single debate that's ever been out there. And when you have politicians, which basically go out in front of people and say blatant lies, and you'll see that a lot of people believe those lies because they have no real way of verifying which side is true or not. And we know now from past history, recent history, even the fact checkers are just controlled by one side or the other. The average person really can't get clear information to make a clear judgment. And it goes all the way back when you look at our education system. At least in the United States, we're not taught anything about financial. We're not taught about economics. In fact, we're told the exact opposite about economics. We all started that in that place. I was the exact same when I came out with my basic education of economics. I had no idea what was actually going on with our system, with our government. The only way that I found out about this was externally after the 2008 crash, which was the first time I had actually put in money. I had finally I was starting my career out. I had some extra money. I put it into the stock market and watched it all disappear. And so that caused me to reinvestigate what was actually going on, spending hundreds of hours listening to podcasts, reading, and finding out what exactly was going wrong with our system. And then down the line, a couple of years later, finally reading about Bitcoin and learning how it was designed to fix this system. Now, Bitcoin's not a perfect system, of course. It's definitely something that is changing the world, but it's built on technology which is aging very quickly, and we're seeing a lot of new systems emerge. But going back to the main question, how do we get people to understand? I think this is one of those things where it's a combination. It's a combination of being advocates for our own technology, going out there and trying to calmly explain to people why this system is actually built for them. It's not easy. This is very, very difficult work. It is very frustrating work at times. There has to be a benefit, and I think everybody on here has expressed in some one way, shape, or form it's more of their mission, because if it wasn't a mission, there are easier ways to make money, quite frankly, to make a living. This is one of the more difficult ones, one of the more challenging ones. And especially for the coins that are smaller out there, like Nervos, what keeps us going is that we watch the larger coins, the Bitcoins and Ethereums. We've observed the problems that they're having right now. These are barriers to mass adoption. I oftentimes, when somebody asks me like, what coin do you get behind? What team are you on? Well, I'm pretty much on every team. I consider myself to be agnostic. It doesn't actually matter to me which coin wins, quote unquote wins. I just want to see mass adoption of decentralized technology. And so the reason that I work with Nervos is because I believe they have one of the best technological angles out there, and it's one that I support. And they're one of the things that we've seen in this industry is that we can't really anticipate what's next very well. There are challenges that repeatedly come out, and we don't know what they are yet. The NFT thing was crazy. I didn't see the NFTs coming out. I didn't think that was going to lead the last wave. And I don't know what's going to be in the next wave. But the only thing that we do know is that oftentimes when these challenges come up, these new hurdles come up that we need to work around as an industry, flexibility is one of the things that will help with that. So that's one of the reasons I'm with Nervos. And I openly recognize that Nervos has certain things that it has adopted that are different from some of the other chains, some of the other UTXO chains out here there. And ultimately, I think there's a place for all of us to flourish in the future. And so that's a lot of what keeps me going. That's why I'm with UTXOs, is because I believe that they are better for that future. They're going to be they're enabling the solutions to the problems we haven't even found yet that we need to get past to really get mass adoption.
Perfect. Thank you.
I had something I wanted to add to that, if that's okay.
Please, I'm here for that. I'm here to give the floor.
I think you really said something that resonated with me. So the first part of the question is of why, how did we get to this place? I think there's sort of two avenues. One is some retail customers came because of the whole get rich quick thing. I'm not sure that we'll get them back. But then some, we sort of got tarred with the, a few bad apples spoiled a bunch problem of, there are a few bad actors. And how do we, but the second part of the question I think is more interesting. And that's what I think Jordan was resonating on, which is no consumer should look at the existing economic system and think, yes, this is fine. This is great. And I want it to stay exactly like this. And so if like ultimately all of us here, we're on the same team decentralization. And if we can get people to realize that and to sort of see that as the alternative to this other system that's not working so great, then I think we can really see the sea change that we're all sort of expecting and hoping will eventually happen.
Perfect. Thank you for that. So, Hongchao, I would like to bring you in, and feel free, Hans, to kind of chime in, or Nervos, or even Alex, in regards to Ergo. Why have another blockchain? How many blockchains do we really need? What prompted you to build on a new one versus, maybe applying for a job at Input Output or something like that? What drives this kind of fragmentation of talent in different sectors, and to build up something different versus what's already been out there?
I think number one, personally, I believe the project, like the other thing, for example, it has some unique value proposition that is interesting. Like technically, it's quite interesting, and we believe that you can build like good DApps, more secure DApps on top of the platform, and that's one thing. Another thing is that at least I believe in a multi-chain world in the future. It's in my mind, it's almost it almost feels like programming languages. So like you will have like different programming languages with different kind of trade-offs in the future. Maybe they will connect to each other and so on. And I think that's kind of my mind model. So yeah, and I really believe in alternatives, and I feel that like going back to the fiat currency topic that you talked about, because I am from China and I live in Europe, and I've been witnessing like different kind of like models, like political models and economic models, and I really feel that's like alternatives is very important. So like this is like one of the things for me. I believe in alternatives, so I want to like work on something that, even though it's kind of small, but it provides some kind of alternatives to the mix, basically. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely answers it. Thank you for that. Alex, you come from, in the real world, a very You have behind you a very good history of working in software development with some big name companies. You've been in the industry for decades, and now you're here with a small market cap cryptocurrency called Ergo. What made you make that shift? And obviously, anybody can see the amount of effort being put into every week by the developers in the ecosystem on Discord chats and all the improvements that are slowly brick by brick building up this blockchain. But what made you make that shift? What was so attractive about leaving maybe the corporate hierarchy and building something that is very much from the bottom up?
Yeah, it was fun mostly. Yeah, so it was like fun project because when you are in a big corporation, you're kind of following a lot of rules. We have regulations almost about everything. This was Chinese company, and we have many different regulations and many different documents which we had to follow. So I feel like very constrained as a software developer with what I can do and how I can do it. So for me, this was like a fun project. And also it was technologically very interesting at the time because it was a lot of very good new ideas, kind of on top of what we had, Bitcoin and Ethereum, like state of the art at that time, and some other projects were still in development. So in Ergo, it's a combination of so many different things, which we implemented from the first version. It was really challenging and fun, mostly. I didn't think about money at all at the time.
Right. Perfect. Ben, I was curious. Now that Cardano is headed into this Voltaire era, which is centered around this theme of governance, how do you kind of address the criticisms of the proof of stake model where people say, oh, you just throw money and you have more voting power, and kind of countering that with this new era of Cardano's development where you're trying to push governance out further into the community? I mean, that must be very challenging, and also you're setting a precedent, right? Because proof of work, we all understand it very well, but proof of stake is one of those things that every year seems to have more and more development on that side.
Yeah, so our push is that we, Cardano or ADA, we want it to be treated as a commodity. So how do you do that is you actually get it to be able to be decentralized in basically every way you can measure it, preferably, right? So if you wanted to harvest a bushel of wheat, you can go grow one in your backyard right now. You can harvest it whenever you like. And then at the point of, when you sell it, then, okay, that's when you have to pay attention to certain rules and regulations. And so we've gone to great lengths to decentralize our system in many ways, right? Like our block production is decentralized. We don't do that anymore. We used to, but we went through a process to get that out. One of the last things is governance, right? How does the community actually choose what changes they want in the system, right? There's a company named IO that participates in Cardano now, adding certain capabilities and working with the founding companies to get those capabilities implemented. But that's a small group of people. So how do you distribute it? Well, you use technologies like what we're building for Voltaire, where you're going to have DReps. So generally people that you would think of as being informed, you're able to delegate your voting power to them and they can vote on your behalf, or you can vote on your own. You can do it either way. But that type of mechanism puts the power in their hands. And so what we're going to enable is we're going to enable a piece of code to basically be up at the front door, right? Ready to be turned on. But the community actually has to vote on flipping the feature flag. If they vote no, that code just sits and never gets enabled. If they vote yes, the parameter will update in some future epoch and that functionality will be enabled. and now they're in control. That's what we want to build, right? We want to build a commodity that everybody can use. So it's tricky because it's governance, and governance is tricky. So what we're trying to do is start with, here's a few basic things you have to be able to do. We're trying to not go too far, because if you go too far, you end up in these conversations about, well, is that what you should do or not? And let's leave that up to the government. They can figure that out. But we need the basic, scaffold to start with. And then once we get the scaffolding in place, you can decorate it with whatever you like.
Perfect. Thank you for that explanation. Speaking about decentralization, ultimately, there's a tendency for a community to look towards a small number of voices. Maybe that's due to mental bandwidth or just this idea of credibility. And it's usually around a group of core developers. How do you guys envision those that actually build the things, directly into the protocol or allow people to vote on certain changes? How do you envision transitioning in terms of passing the baton to the community to continue iterating and bringing about improvements? Because at the end of the day, I suppose the blockchain lives, but we all die at some point in the game, correct? So what is the runway for you guys, especially the core developers? How long can you be in this mess?
Let me talk from Cardano, because many of you may have similar models, right? We have a treasury that's been accumulating fees for some time now. And once we put control into the hands of the community, that can unlock that treasury. Now the community can vote on spending those funds for certain activities. So it'll turn into, you'll still have to listen to people to figure out what are the activities that you should go promote or go support, right? You'll build a community around that. You have to find an implementer that's competent and can actually do the work and accept the payment that they would do for that work. But that model's there, and the pot of money in the treasury is quite literally controlled by the government, which will be the individual ADA holders.
Yeah, please, somebody else, a developer that kind of questions, you'll be here building up all these fascinating things today, but at some point you have to give the keys to the kingdom back to the actual users, right? And trust them to continue where you left off. I'm curious to see what Jordan and Hongchao, for example, think of this, and maybe Alex, and as you guys are very integral in the development of this protocol and making sure people are educated and understand how it works and why they should care.
Yeah, I guess I can go first on that. I think that really, again, this comes down to the topic of education and installing your values into the community and really trying to reach people at large that are going to be advocates for you in the future. Nervos is very much a community-oriented project, so that takes a very forefront pillar in our approach to the ecosystem in general. Just like many of the other projects, we do have a system for a treasury it's actually currently being burned, but in the future it can be activated by a community hard fork, which would allow the continuous funds into the future to be put into some type of a DAO system, which then could be distributed by vote by the community. But ultimately, these types of things are only as successful as the community itself, which is why we try to do our best to jumpstart that now and then put in the systems that will allow it to be self-governed in the future. When you look at a chain that's like 20, 30 years into the future, it gets much, much more difficult to predict what's going on. And while we've done our best to build a platform that's both flexible and long-term sustainable, it's really the health of the community that will take it going forward. And so when you look at certain other systems out there, it's really interesting. And I'm thinking about like Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash is one of the best examples because of their split based on ideologies. I actually see that as a healthy thing, because ultimately you're allowing freedom in the system. If you could not fork the chain, then you're oppressing one side or the other. So it's a form of evolution, really, and all chains will probably evolve over time, including Nervos. And really, that's a power of the chain to be able to continue to evolve, just as all technology basically has to keep changing and moving with the environment. That's how the technology evolves.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I would
yes, go
like
ahead.
to add. Yeah, so
Yes.
we in Ergo we also follow a community first approach. So most of the project is done by community, or Ergo Foundation doesn't fund projects. And for core development and protocols, we follow very strict rules in coding review, and everything is open source, and we put a lot of efforts on documentation so that everything is actually documented and understandable. So we always keep in mind the other guy who will look at the code and try to get it and understand and try to reproduce something and start up development and so on. So we think open source is the key to achieve this long-term survivability, I would say, or sustainability of the chain. And many developers join even core development right now. So I think this is kind of the approach we follow in Ergo.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I think I very much agree with what Jordan and Alex said. What I will add is that maybe as core devs, we will try our best to enable like interesting applications to be built on top of a platform that is actually useful for the consumer. Because if there are applications that's actually useful for normal users, then people will be interested in underlying platform, and then it probably will be sustainable in the long run. That's new people will coming into the system and like ecosystem and help contribute to the ecosystem. Yeah, so that's one of the things that core devs should strive to do. Yeah.
Now for Bitcoin Cash, obviously, governance is kind of given from the get-go, but at the same time, you have to kind of, as you entrust that responsibility, community, you also have the challenge of attracting new participants, right? Why should people kind of look further into Bitcoin Cash, and what are kind of the shortcomings that come with having full decentralization, but also the pros of that as well?
So here at Bitcoin Cash, I would say that over the years, like people would often point to the price action as, oh my God, you guys are not going anywhere. But I, as someone who is deeply involved in the community and all the different large events that happened over the years, I would say that this is rather a painful way of learning by doing. That is kind of unique to us. Really, not many other chains can claim to have seen and iterated the same way as we do. We learned quite a few things over the years as a matter of practicality. Like, for example, one thing that early Bitcoiners have often speculated on is that, well, the chain can never be compromised, or the community can always fork because you cannot stop a fork, which is true. And the incentives will just do its thing and sort everything out. Without you having to worry about it, which is false. So what we have learned over the years is that a lot of the things people would think is, well, it's just a thing that would happen. You can just use the last resorts. It turns out that last resorts are really, really expensive, for one. And if you don't build institutions in the way that you would like them, that you would like things to be resolved, then resolving things the expensive way is going to be extremely harmful. So, and on the other hand, some chains have taken the opposite effect. You build I mean, no offense to some of the other people around, but you have a explicit treasury, you build a foundation around it, and you have an explicit, grand congregation of wise people around, and then you have this formalized token voting. What you then end up with is that, congratulations, you stabilize a lot of your things so that people can build on it. But then, is this really what we started off wanting? And I think being a version of Bitcoin, I think that we might have different goals as many other chains which are more tolerant towards having central entities. So what we ended up with is what we call the chip process, which is a process that aims to have predictable processes. We are now on a more or less agreed yearly upgrade schedule, and we aim to have maximum information distribution, especially among stakeholders. Not just the vague notion of community or things that often, or a set of participants that often turn out to be unmotivated, such as token voting, because speculators can just jump, and we have seen abysmally low participation in some other protocols, which we do not intend to replicate. So these things are by no means perfect, but we did resist at least two attempts of takeover while we learn by doing. So the processes will keep being improved, but I think we are getting there. And in terms of bad publicity that we get, well, it's a double-edged sword, right? I tend to believe that we tend to get more bad press when we screw up, and that has happened a couple times. But on the other hand, if we start to do well, and I believe we are on our way to do so, then we get the benefit of that too. In that a lot of people already know us, and we can get them to take another look at us easier than starting from nowhere. So yeah.
Thank you for your response and input. John, and kind of seeing things from your point of view, right? You don't represent any particular blockchain. You represent basically sort of like a core bundle of values and advocating for technological innovation. What do you fail to see in the space that you wish or you hope to see be implemented in the future from a technological point of view, and perhaps how the UTXO model can kind of fit into that equation, maybe better than some of the alternative transaction models out there?
So I think there's a lot of things that people have hit on previously. So I think there's the inherent security that's available in the UTXO model that's critically important as people develop financial applications. So that would be my kind of quick answer to that. To back up and kind of answer more the larger concerns, I think it's a decades
decades, plural, long push to, I think as someone else noted, change people's views on currencies and communities in general. So that's kind of the broad kind of emphasis and broad push. And when you look at things from like a technology perspective, ideally it's that the technologies kind of fade into the background and people are more interested, surprised, and delighted by applications that will be built on top of the technologies. I think that's a really critical thing as we kind of look at things, because one of the benefits that I have at Wolfram and as part of Wolfram Blockchain Labs and being part of this emerging area of technology is looking at new areas of emerging technology and see that people, like the people in this room are the people who care the most about UTXO technologies and about blockchain technologies. But unfortunately, consumers won't really care as much. They'll care about the benefits. And that's the critical thing in moving from the emergence of technologies to the applications that use the primary technological benefits of those technologies. And it's a really, really critical thing. And it's hard to kind of grasp that. I'll give you an example that someone had about just completely other technology. So this wasn't even blockchain technology, but they said that when consumers are looking at the inside of houses and trying to decide which house they're going to buy, they're looking at all of those items. They're not looking at, do you guys make the best nails? They don't care. They probably don't care at all. They're just like, you know, are the aspect of these houses, these benefits that I see, are they going to adhere to my standards? Are they going to be useful to me, et cetera? And I feel like that's kind of this transition that we need to make, like for a lot of folks. What are the applications and the benefits to end users that are really going to make them care so much about those applications that the underlying technologies move forward as a result?
Right. Yeah, couldn't agree more. I suppose to kind of begin wrapping up closing thoughts about you know, our loose alliance, right? Ben, and everybody else, what could we do to kind of help support other UTXO chains like the ones in the alliance and kind of advocate for better models essentially that have more positives than drawbacks when it is relatively unpopular by the saturation in the market today?
I think this is a rising boats kind of conversation. So I fully understand that there's technology that we build now that we're going to sunset later because somebody's going to have a better idea or a better way to do it. I think being insular is bad for us, and we have the technology we're building should definitely push us towards community sharing, reuse, all of the things we want to promote. The business I work for, our core ethos is we do things with open core, right? So we license our software in such a way that it's able to be taken and reused basically without penalty. You don't have to contribute it back to us. You can use it whatever you want. I think on our side, we should do kind of a better job packaging and distributing it so that it can be reused, so that there are building blocks that, yeah, we solved them. You don't need to do that again. Here it is, take it. And I think if we can build up that type of exchange, we're going to move a lot faster than if we try to do it all ourselves. So that's how we're going to keep pushing it, right? We're going to keep pushing Cardano in that way. I talked about turning it over to the community through Voltaire. And then we're also building other chains, right? We announced Midnight. Midnight has a UTXO component inside of it. We're going to keep evolving, and we know that we can't do this on our own.
And as for kind of the newer chains on here, is there anything that, well, first of all, how were you approached to join the alliance, and what do you hope to get out of being a part of an alliance in general? For example, Hans or Hongchao, what were the reasons to even join in the first place? Why try to collaborate?
So I think there's sort of a common feeling that before we've reached this inflection point where blockchain systems become the de facto standard, everyone kind of agrees that we're living in a multi-chain environment. And so if you take that as a given, then it makes sense to try to find a community within that ecosystem where you fit. The UTXO Alliance was a perfect fit for us because the things that are valued by the members of the Alliance are the same things that we value. And forming communities based on shared values is like the oldest trick in the book.
And Hongchao with the lithium. Oh, go ahead, Alex, please.
Yeah, I completely agree with what Hans said. I would add that it's important to have in alliance, maybe to have some standardization for interoperability. If we have a multi-chain world, then it would be very good to have some clearly defined standards, especially if the chains are all UTXO. So the design patterns and the solutions and architectures could be very similar. So some standardization would bring a lot of value and simplification of integration solutions like bridges and asset transfers and so on.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think we joined Alliance to basically learn from each other and get inspired by our peers. And if UTXO is really a great technology, then there must be like interesting applications built on top of it, and we want to learn from that, and we want to provide our experience as well.
Jordan, do you have any thoughts on kind of where Nervos fits a role in the UTXO Alliance and kind of in the crypto industry overall as you guys continue to push your technology forward?
Yeah, and I think the best way to explain that is to, from the standpoint of Nervos, how we got involved with the UTXO Alliance in the first place. So if you go back to about 3 years to when I started with Nervos, one of the first things I was tasked with was to learn the cell model, which is our UTXO-based platform. And I was talking to the head of business development, who was Ben Morris at the time, the former head of business development. And he was asking me, so now that you've learned the cell model, what do you think about it? How are we going to bring more developers to the platform? And I had to be completely honest with him. I was like, this is extremely difficult. Like, this is, compared to the account model used by Ethereum, this is something that requires you to really spin around in your head how you think about programming on a blockchain. It's completely unintuitive for most people because it's very different than most of the traditional systems of programming that we are typically used to dealing with. So we decided, wait, what are we going to do about this? Ethereum's dominating the sector right now, and they're continuing to expand. How are we going to compete with that and bring developers over to this side of the platform and actually see the benefits that UTXOs provide? And so we kind of figured out, there's a lot of other blockchains out there that are UTXO based. They're having the same exact problems that we're having. We need to work with them. We need to start collaborating more because this comes back to an educational issue. This is what's easy and familiar versus what we believe is going to be the future. So Ethereum being the dominant one that we are in competition with I consider to be friendly competition, but still in competition with, just for developer resources. I believe Ben Morris reached out to somebody from IOHK, and the alliance was formed in that regard. And I'm sure it's already been expressed. Like, a lot of our goals are very similar. We all publish completely open source code. We encourage each other to learn and take whatever they can to build stronger systems. And down the line, we intend to do the same. We borrow from other projects as well. Whenever we see something that has been done that we believe that we could incorporate, that is a good idea, we're going to take advantage of that when we can. And we absolutely encourage others to do the same from us, because ultimately what we're trying to do is just build better systems. And I think that through collaboration is the best way to approach that.
Wonderful, wonderful. If anybody has any closing thoughts, I think that was a good point to end it on. But if anybody has anything else they would like to add to the conversation before concluding, please do so.
So I would just like to add a point in terms of cross-chain collaboration. So it is nice to talk about standards, having a common standards, and then everybody being in a conference room and having good feelings and all. But I think it is prudent to look at how the current account base, or rather, I would even go as far as to say the EVM world came to be. The EVM world did not come to be by the Ethereum guys being there, and then the Avalanche guys being there, and then a bunch of Polygon guys being there, and then to get into a conference room and then hammering out a cross-chain standard. They come to be by the Ethereum guys hammering out a standard on their own, and then they have great products out, MetaMask, Uniswap, and Sushi, and later SushiSwap and other things. And then other chains just deciding that, okay, I want that, and they got onto a similar boat, and then they got integrated into products like MetaMask, and then they added some innovations on top. Sometimes those work, sometimes they don't. And I'm not saying that having standards or hammering out standards is not valuable, but I'm rather saying that it is first and foremost the most important to have great products out, products that are extensible and can be used on other chains potentially, and then people want that, and then the capital can pour in, and then we can go from there. So in this regard, I particularly like the approach, for example, that is being done by Komodo, or rather the atomic DEX in particular. In that, you know what? I'm just gonna go ahead and do it, and chains can be integrated, and then I have a product out there that people can use, and then some people use it. There's some volume, and that's a great place to be. TLDR, having a great product is probably where things can give you a good starting point.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And thank you for that input. Anybody else before we conclude? Any last comments before we don't see each other for 10 years? I'm just kidding. Okay, I suppose everybody's had their fill. We're approaching the scheduled end time anyway. I want to thank you all for taking time out of your busy day to participate in this roundtable discussion. I know we're all in different time zones, and trust me, it was a pain for me as well to organize it on my own. But I am very thankful for each and every one of you for sticking around. And I know Johnny Law from Digibyte and Charles from Komodo had to step out a bit early, which is completely fine. But I want to thank them as well. And apart from that, I would just say I think it's very inspirational that you all continue to develop in a medium that is not looked upon a lot of times in a favorable light. You understand why you're building things. The cracks in the existing system are very evident, both in and outside of the crypto industry. And I believe that ultimately the best systems will end up winning, right? If you build it correctly and you have usable products that are better than what's currently out there, eventually you will have the demand for them as well. So thank you for your resiliency and for continuing to build in the way you all are doing in your own communities. All right. So without further ado, thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.